Welcome back, everyone. You know how much we love to get into the nitty-gritty of complex topics, but sometimes you just want the bottom line, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much information out there these days. Sometimes it feels impossible to even know where to start.
Exactly. So that's what we're doing today, a deep dive into personal finance. But with a bit of a twist, you've prepped me with this awesome summary of the key themes and insights from like a whole bunch of different money management podcasts,
Yes, a
right?
ton of them, actually.
So we can give our listeners the distilled wisdom without them having to wade through hours and hours of content. It's like the ultimate cheat sheet for getting a grip on your finances.
I love that, the ultimate cheat sheet. And I think what's so cool about this is it really does cover the full spectrum,
Mhm.
from the very basics, understanding your cash flow, all the way to the more, I guess, the psychological side of money, how our emotions and behaviors influence our financial decisions.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Where does this whole journey of taking control of your finances even begin?
Well, like you said, the foundation really is understanding your current financial situation. It sounds simple, but so many people skip over this step.
Yeah, it's easy to just kind of put your head in the sand and hope for the best, but that's obviously not a real strategy, is it?
Not at all. You
Yeah.
got to know where you're starting from before you can figure out where you want to go. It's like trying to go on a road trip without a map. You need to know your starting point and your destination to plot your course.
Right. So, what are the concrete steps involved in getting that clear picture of your current finances?
So the first thing is knowing exactly how much money is coming in each month. Your income from your job, any side hustles, any other sources of income, get it all down.
Got to track every penny, huh?
And then, and this is where it can get a little uncomfortable for some people, you have to track your expenses. Every single one.
Every coffee, every subscription, every little thing.
Everything. And the good news is there are apps for this now. They make it so much easier to track your spending automatically.
That is good news. I know I would never stick with it if I had to write everything down in a notebook.
Me neither. And once you have a handle on your income and your expenses, you can start to analyze where your money's actually going. Are you spending more than you're earning? Where are the biggest drains on your cash flow? That kind of thing.
So, it's not just about tracking, it's about really understanding your spending patterns, right?
Exactly. And that's where that, like you said, that discomfort can come in. Because sometimes you might not like what you see.
Right. You might realize you're spending way more on takeout than you thought, or that those little impulse buys are really adding up.
Exactly. But that awareness is crucial because it's the first step towards making positive changes. And the good news is the summary shows that there's a huge emphasis on this idea that managing your money doesn't have to be about deprivation. It's about making conscious choices that align with your values and your goals.
I love that. It's not about punishing yourself, it's about empowering yourself to make smart decisions with your money. So we've got this clear picture of our financial situation. What's the next step towards building that solid financial framework?
It's time to talk about the dreaded B word, budgeting.
Yeah. Everyone's least favorite topic, right?
It definitely gets a bad rap, but the podcasts we looked at really emphasize that budgeting doesn't have to be restrictive or complicated. It's just about creating a plan for your money so you can make sure you're spending it on the things that are most important to you.
Okay, so how do we ditch the negative connotations and approach budgeting in a more like positive and proactive way?
I think the first thing is to find a budgeting method that works for you. There are a lot of different approaches out there, and what works for one person might not work for another.
So it's not like one size fits all when it comes to budgeting.
Definitely not. The summary mentioned a couple of the popular methods, like the envelope system, where you physically allocate cash into different envelopes for different spending categories, or zero-based budgeting, where you assign every dollar of your income a specific purpose.
So with the zero-based budgeting at the end of the month, ideally you'd have $0 left over.
Well, not necessarily. It's more about being intentional with every dollar. So if you have money left over at the end of the month, you can consciously decide to save it, invest it, or allocate it to a different category.
Gotcha. So it's about making sure every dollar has a job to do.
Exactly. And regardless of the specific method you choose, there are a few core components that are consistent across all successful budgets.
Like what are the must-haves for any budget?
The first is tracking. You absolutely have to keep track of your spending. No matter how good you think you are at estimating, you'll likely be surprised once you actually start tracking.
Right, it's easy to underestimate those little expenses that add up over time.
Definitely. And once you're tracking your spending, You can start to identify areas where you might want to cut back or adjust. Maybe you realize you're spending way more on eating out than you'd like to.
And that's where setting priorities comes in, right?
Absolutely. You need to distinguish between your needs and your wants. Needs are the essentials, things like housing, food, transportation, healthcare. Wants are the things that are nice to have, but not essential for your survival.
Like that daily latte or that new pair of shoes.
Exactly. And when you're working with a limited budget, it's important to prioritize your needs and be more mindful of your spending on wants.
So it's not about depriving yourself, it's about making conscious choices that align with your values and your goals.
Right. If those new shoes are really important to you, then by all means budget for them. But make sure you're doing it consciously, not just impulsively.
And a budget isn't something you just set once and forget about, right?
No, it's a living document. You need to revisit it regularly, at least monthly, and adjust as needed. Maybe your income changes or your expenses go up. Life throws curveballs all the time.
Speaking of curveballs, that brings us to a really important topic that came up constantly in the podcast summaries: emergency funds.
Absolutely. Building an emergency fund is one of the most crucial steps you can take to protect your financial well-being.
So, what exactly is an emergency fund and why is it so important?
It's essentially a stash of money that you set aside specifically for unexpected expenses. Things like a job loss, a medical emergency, a major car repair, that kind of thing. Life is unpredictable, and having that financial cushion can make a huge difference when those unexpected events inevitably occur.
Right. It can mean the difference between weathering the storm relatively unscathed and falling into debt or having to make major sacrifices.
Exactly. The general recommendation is to aim for 3 to 6 months worth of essential living expenses in your emergency fund.
That can feel like a lot of money, especially when you're first starting out.
It can, but it's important to start small and be consistent. Even if you can only save $50 or $100 a month, that's better than nothing. The key is to make it a habit and to gradually increase your contributions as you're able.
And where should you keep your emergency fund?
You want it to be easily accessible, so a high-yield savings account is generally a good option. You're not going to earn a ton of interest, but that's not the primary goal here. The priority is liquidity and safety. You want to be able to access that money quickly and easily when you need it.
Okay, so we've talked about budgeting and emergency funds. What's the next piece of the puzzle when it comes to managing your money?
Well, once you have those foundational elements in place, you can start to think about saving for specific goals, both short-term and long-term.
What's the difference between short-term and long-term goals?
Short-term goals are typically things you want to achieve within the next year or two, like taking a vacation, buying a new car, or making a down payment on a house. Long-term goals are further out on the horizon, like saving for retirement or your children's education.
And the approach to saving for those different types of goals is going to vary, right?
Yeah, the time horizon and the amount you need to save will obviously influence your strategy. For short-term goals, you might choose a more conservative approach, like a high-yield savings account or a certificate of deposit. For long-term goals, you'll want to consider investments that have the potential for higher growth over time, like stocks or mutual funds.
So it's about aligning your investment strategy with your time horizon and your risk tolerance.
Exactly. And the podcasts really stress the importance of starting early and being consistent with your savings, no matter how small the amounts might seem initially. The power of compound interest is really incredible. The earlier you start, the more time your money has to grow.
Compound interest, that's where your earnings start earning their own earnings.
Exactly. It's like a snowball rolling downhill, getting bigger and bigger over time. And that brings us to a topic that can feel pretty intimidating to a lot of people: investing.
Yeah, investing can seem really complex and risky, especially for beginners.
It definitely can. But the podcast we reviewed did a great job of demystifying investing and breaking it down into more manageable concepts. They emphasized that you don't need to be a financial expert to start investing. There are plenty of resources available to help you learn the basics and get started.
So what are some of the fundamental things to understand about investing?
Well, first thing is that there are different types of investments, each with their own level of risk and potential return. Stocks, for example, represent ownership in a company. When you buy a stock, you're essentially buying a small piece of that company. Stocks have the potential for high growth, but they also carry more risk than other types of investments.
So stocks are a bit of a gamble then.
They can be, but over the long term, stocks have historically outperformed other asset classes. That doesn't mean they're right for everyone, though. It depends on your risk tolerance and your time horizon. If you're investing for a retirement, for example, and you have a long time horizon, you might be more comfortable taking on some risk in pursuit of higher returns.
Okay, what about other types of investments?
Bonds are another common type of investment. When you buy a bond, you're essentially lending money to an entity, like a government or a corporation. Bonds generally offer lower returns than stocks, but they're also considered less risky.
So stocks are higher risk, higher potential reward. Bonds are lower risk, lower potential reward.
That's a good way to think about it. And then there are mutual funds and exchange-traded funds, or ETFs. These are like baskets of different investments, so they offer instant diversification. You can invest in a single mutual fund or ETF and get exposure to hundreds or even thousands of different stocks or bonds.
That sounds like a good way to spread your risk.
It is,
Yeah.
and it's one of the most common pieces of advice you'll hear from financial experts. Diversify your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. By spreading your money across different asset classes, you could reduce your overall risk.
Okay, diversification. Got it. What else should people keep in mind when they're first starting out with investing?
One of the biggest things is to understand your own risk tolerance. How comfortable are you with the idea of your investments fluctuating in value? Some people are perfectly fine riding out the ups and downs of the market, while others get really stressed out by volatility.
Right. If you're losing sleep over your investments, you're probably taking on too much risk.
Exactly. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to risk tolerance. It's a personal decision based on your individual circumstances and your financial goals.
So we've covered budgeting, emergency funds, saving, and investing. Is there anything else that's crucial for building a solid financial foundation?
One really important thing is to have a plan for managing debt. Debt is a reality for a lot of people, and it can feel really overwhelming. But the podcasts we reviewed stress that there are strategies you can use to tackle your debt and regain control of your finances.
Okay, so let's talk about debt. What are some of the most effective approaches for dealing with it?
One popular method is the debt snowball method. This involves focusing on paying off your smallest debts first, regardless of their interest rate. The idea is that seeing those smaller debts disappear can give you a sense of momentum and motivation to keep going.
That makes sense. Sometimes those small wins can make a big difference psychologically.
Definitely. And then there's the debt avalanche method, which is more mathematically focused. With this approach, you prioritize paying off the debts with the highest interest rates first. This saves you more money on interest in the long run, but it can take longer to see those initial debts disappear.
So it's a trade-off between psychological motivation and financial efficiency.
Right. The best approach for you will depend on your individual circumstances and your personality. And there are other strategies you can consider as well, like debt consolidation or refinancing.
Can you explain those a little bit?
Sure. Debt consolidation involves taking out a new loan to pay off multiple existing debts. This can simplify your finances by giving you just one monthly payment, and it can potentially lower your interest rate as well. Refinancing is similar, but it usually focuses on a single loan, like a mortgage or a car loan. You essentially replace your existing loan with a new loan that has more favorable terms, like a lower interest rate or a longer repayment period.
So both of those strategies can potentially save you money and simplify your debt management.
They can, but it's important to shop around and compare offers carefully before you commit.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about budgeting, emergency funds, saving, investing, and managing debt. What's the next big piece of the financial planning puzzle?
Planning for retirement is huge. It's something that a lot of people put off, but the earlier you start, the better off you'll be.
I know, it can feel so far away, especially when you're young. But the power of compound interest really works in your favor when you start saving for retirement early.
Absolutely. Even small contributions made early on can grow significantly over time. And the podcast we reviewed highlighted some key things to consider when you're planning for retirement.
Like, what are some of the must-knows?
The first is defining what you envision for your retirement. What kind of lifestyle do you hope to have? Do you want to travel, pursue hobbies, spend time with family, downsize your home?
It's about painting a picture of what you want your retirement to look like.
Exactly. And once you have a clear vision, you can start to estimate how much money you'll need to achieve those goals.
And that number is going to vary widely depending on individual circumstances and desired lifestyle.
Absolutely. There's no magic number that applies to everyone, but there are tools and resources available to help you estimate your retirement needs.
So once you have an idea of how much you need to save, what's next?
Then it's about creating a plan to reach that goal. This might involve maximizing contributions to retirement accounts like 401ks or IRAs, considering additional investment options, and potentially working with a financial advisor to get personalized guidance.
And the podcasts also emphasize the importance of staying informed about changes in retirement planning rules and regulations, right?
Definitely. The rules can change over time, so it's important to stay up to date.
Okay, so we've talked about the practical steps of planning for retirement, but what about the more emotional and psychological aspects of managing money?
That's such an important part of the equation, and it's something that a lot of traditional financial advice overlooks. The podcast we reviewed really dove into the human side of money, acknowledging that our emotions, our biases, and our behaviors play a huge role in our financial decisions.
Right. It's not just about crunching numbers and following formulas. It's about understanding how our psychology impacts our spending habits and our investment choices.
Exactly. And the podcast offered some really practical insights into how to manage those emotional and behavioral factors. One of the big things they talked about was emotional spending. We all do it to some extent. It's those impulse purchases we make when we're feeling stressed, bored, sad, or even happy.
I'm definitely guilty of that. Retail therapy is a real thing.
It is. And the key is to become aware of your own emotional spending triggers and to develop strategies for managing them. Maybe that means taking a break before you make a big purchase or finding healthier ways to cope with stress.
So it's about being more mindful of your spending habits and understanding the underlying emotions that might be driving them.
Exactly. And the podcasts also emphasize the importance of developing a healthy mindset around money. It's not about punishing yourself for past mistakes. It's about learning from them and moving forward in a positive and proactive way.
That makes sense. We all make financial mistakes, but it's how we respond to those mistakes that matters most.
Definitely. And another key aspect of developing a healthy money mindset is focusing on your goals, both short-term and long-term. Visualizing those goals and reminding yourself why they're important to you can help you stay motivated and on track.
So it's about connecting your financial decisions to your values and your aspirations.
Exactly. When you have a clear sense of purpose, it's easier to make smart choices with your money.
Now, this is where things get really exciting. The podcasts we reviewed highlighted how technology has revolutionized the way we manage our money.
Absolutely. There are so many amazing tools and resources available now that can help you track your spending, create budgets, automate your savings, research investments, and so much more.
It's like having a personal finance assistant right in your pocket.
Exactly. And the best part is a lot of these tools are free or very affordable.
So let's talk about some of the specific tools and resources that people can use to make managing their money easier and more effective.
One of the most popular categories is budgeting apps. These apps connect to your bank accounts and credit cards and automatically track your spending. They can categorize your transactions, create budgets, and even send you alerts when you're getting close to your spending limits.
I love budgeting apps. They make tracking so much easier than doing it manually.
Me too. And there are a ton of different options out there, so you can find one that fits your needs and preferences.
What about saving and investing? Are there apps for that too?
Absolutely. There are apps that can help you automate your savings, research and compare different investment options, and even invest for you based on your risk tolerance and financial goals.
So you don't even need to be a financial expert to start investing.
Not anymore. Technology has really made investing more accessible than ever before.
And what about resources for learning more about personal finance? Are there any good ones you'd recommend?
There are so many. There are websites, blogs, podcasts, books, online courses, you name it. The key is to find resources that are reputable and trustworthy. Look for sources that are unbiased, evidence-based, and easy to understand.
And don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. There are financial advisors and counselors who can provide personalized guidance and support.
Absolutely. Don't feel like you have to navigate this journey alone.
Now, one of the things that really stood out to me in the podcast summaries was the emphasis on the power of real-life stories.
Me too. Hearing from real people who have faced financial challenges and come out on the other side can be incredibly inspiring and motivating.
It's like having a mentor or a guide who's already walked the path you're on.
Exactly. And it reminds you that you're not alone in your struggles. Everyone makes financial mistakes. Everyone faces setbacks. The key is to learn from those experiences and keep moving forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of personal finance, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that taking control of your finances is within your reach. It doesn't require a finance degree or a ton of money to get started.
It's about making small, consistent changes that add up over time.
Exactly. Start by tracking your spending, create a budget that works for you, build an emergency fund, and explore options for saving and investing.
And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, but that's okay. The important thing is to keep learning, keep growing, and keep moving forward. And as a final thought, I challenge our listeners to think about one small change they can make to their financial habits today. Even something as simple as setting up an automatic transfer to your savings account or packing your lunch instead of eating out every day. Those small changes can make a big difference over time.
I love that challenge. It's a great way to put all of this knowledge into action.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you found it informative and inspiring.
And remember, you've got this.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.